The rain in Seattle doesn't wash things clean. It just makes the grime slicker. It was a Tuesday night, the kind of evening where the weather beats a relentless rhythm against the glass, turning the outside world into a blurred watercolor of gray and charcoal. Inside our Queen Anne townhouse, the silence was heavy, pressing against my eardrums like deep water. I sat at the head of the dining table, watching the candles burn down to jagged stumps of wax. In the center of the table sat a beef Wellington, a dish that requires 3 hours of patience and precision, slowly cooling into an unappetizing brick. The puff pastry, once golden and crisp, had softened, collapsing under the weight of 3 hours of neglect. It was anniversary. Elena was never late. Not without a notification, a calendar invite date, or a quick call. Precision was the currency of our marriage, or so I had believed. She usually threw the door at 6:45 p.m. sharp, the click of her heels on the hardwood announcing the end of the workday. But 6:45 came and went. Then 8 p.m. By 9 p.m., the silence in the house had shifted from anticipatory to oppressive. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I just waited, my fingers drumming a slow on the mahogany table. I am Arthur Vance, and in my line of work, panic is a liability. I am a forensic accountant for Hammond and Schuyler, one of the largest firms on the West Coast. My colleagues call me the architect, because I don't just look at numbers. I see the structure behind them. I see the patterns in chaos. And tonight, the pattern was broken. At 9:47 p.m., my phone finally buzzed. The sound was deafening in the quiet room. The screen lit up with a single message. Crushing deadline. Don't do it. So, 6 words. To most husbands, this would be a disappointment, perhaps a source of irritation. But to an auditor, it was a data point that refused to align with the trend line. Julian Thorne was her managing director, a man who prided himself on work-life balance in every company newsletter. A man who exactly what day it was because I had seen the anniversary marked on the shared department calendar he had access to. A man who, historically, never kept the creative team. 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. I stared at the text. Crushing deadline. The phrasing was off. Elena didn't use the word crushing. She used dent or critical. Crushing was Julian's vocabulary, not hers. The knot in my stomach wasn't heartbreak, not yet. It was the primal, cold alert of a discrepancy found in a ledger. The variance was too high. The explanation was too convenient. I stood up and blew out the candles. The smell of extinguished wick filled the room, acrid and biting. I looked at the ruined dinner, the expensive bottle of Cabernet breathing uselessly into the empty air. I didn't clear the table. I didn't go to bed. Instead, I felt a shift click into place behind my eyes. The worried husband receded, and the architect stepped forward. I walked out of the dining room and headed toward my study. If the numbers didn't add up, it was time to audit the books. My home office was a sharp contrast to the warmth of the dining room. It was a sanctuary of cool grays and steel, lit only by the standby LEDs of my server rack. I closed the door, sealing out the smell of the extinguished candles and the cold beef. I sat in my Herman Miller chair and woke the terminal. The screens hummed to life, bathing the room in a clinical blue glow. Most people think of marriage as a union of hearts and souls. I've always viewed it as a merger of assets and liabilities. Years ago, when we first bought the townhouse, I had consolidated our digital lives for tax efficiency and data security. We had a shared cloud ecosystem. I was the administrator. Elena was the user. It was a practical solution for a practical couple, or so I had thought. She had likely forgotten that while she had a password, I had the master key. I didn't open her social media or check her location history. That was amateur hour. I went straight to the raw data logs, the automatic backups, that occurred every time her phone connected to a Wi-Fi network. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard. The clack, 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 the only sound in the silent house. I bypassed the user-friendly interface and pulled up the command line, querying the text message database for the last 6 months. Query, target. Device, Elena v keyword, Julian. The screen populated instantly. Hundreds of rows of data. My heart hammered against my ribs, a physical betrayal of my calm exterior as I began to read. The early messages were innocuous enough. Work updates, coffee orders, but around 7 months ago, the tone shifted. The syntax became looser, more intimate. "I can't stand going back to him tonight," she had written at 10:15 3 weeks ago. "He's so predictable." "It's suffocating," she sent 2 days later. I read the words with a detached numbness. The him was me. The suffocating predictability was the stability I had worked my entire life to provide for us. It was painful, yes. It was the emotional equivalent of a gut punch. But as I scrolled further, looking for the crushing deadline, from tonight, I found something that made the pain evaporate, replaced instantly by the cold, hard focus of the architect. It wasn't just sex. It was logistics. July 14th, 11:42 a.m. Elena. "Did you approve the vendor invoice for Apex Consulting? I signed the purchase order like you asked." July 14th, 11:45 a.m. Julian. Done. "Funds are routing through the shell in Belize. 50K clean. We're building our war chest, babe." July 20th, 9:15 a.m. Elena. Our suspects. "He thinks I'm just stressed about the QE targets. How much longer until we have enough to bail?" July 20th, 9:18 a.m. 2 more months. Once the Horizon Project budget clears, we liquidate the assets, hit the Cayman accounts, and disappear. Costa Rica is waiting. I stopped scrolling. I sat back, the air leaving my lungs in a slow, controlled exhale. They weren't just cheating, they were embezzling. Julian Thorne was siphoning money from his firm, using fake vendor accounts, and he was using my wife, my brilliant, foolish wife, to sign the fraudulent paperwork. She wasn't just an adulteress, she was an accomplice to grand larceny and wire fraud. The audacity of it was breathtaking. They were funding their ecstasy, their romantic getaway to a new life with stolen corporate funds. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the monitor across the room. The chaos of emotion was inefficient. Instead, I minimized the log window and opened a fresh, blank cell workbook. I typed the headers into the first row. Date, time, recipient, content, fraud value, location. Then I began to type. I started cataloging every incriminating taking, every mention of a dollar amount, reference to an offshore account. I cross-referenced their late nights with the dates of the wire transfers. The husband in me had died the moment I wrote. The auditor had taken his place, and the auditor had a lot of work to do. The transition from night to morning in Seattle is rarely a dramatic event. There is no sudden burst of golden sun, no fanfare of birdsong. Instead, the charcoal darkness simply dilutes, fading into a bruised, heavy slate gray. It is a slow, reluctant surrender of the night, much like the way a truth reveals itself gradually, then all at once. I watched this transition from the window of my study. It was 5:47 a.m. The rain had not stopped. It had merely changed tempo, shifting the aggressive, drumming rhythm of the night to a steady, melancholic drizzle that coated the world in a persistent sheen of misery. My reflection in the glass was a ghost hollow-eyed, the skin drawn tight over my cheekbones, my white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, rolled up to reveal forearms that felt strangely heavy, as if the blood inside them had turned to lead. Behind me, the computer screens had finally gone dark, entering sleep mode after antic, surgical activity. The fan in the server tower whirred softly, cooling the hard drives that now contained the encrypted ruin of my marriage. I had spent the last 7 hours dissecting the life I thought I knew. I had pulled apart the anatomy of my wife's betrayal, with the same clinical precision I used to dismantle corporate tax shelters. I knew where they ate le pichet on Tuesdays, the pink door on Thursdays. I knew where they slept, the Fairmont Olympic room for 12 3 times, the Edgewater room 224 twice. I knew the exact dollar amount they had siphoned from the Horizon project budget to fund their future escape, $250 dated, with a projected $150,000 pending. But now, the data gathering was paused. The spreadsheet was saved, password protected, and hidden within a nested folder structure that looked like a dull hive of municipal tax codes. Now the harder work began. The sun was coming up. Elena would be home soon. I pushed myself away from the desk. My joints popped, a dry, brittle sound in the quiet room. I felt a strange dissociation, a separation between the man who felt the pain, the Arthur who had bought the ring, the Arthur who had held her hand during her mother's funeral, and the entity that was currently operating my body. The architect had taken the wheel. The architect felt no pain. He only identified variables and managed risk. And right now, the biggest risk was Arthur Vance, the husband, showing a crack in the facade. I left the study and walked down the hallway. The house was cold. We kept thermostat low at night to save energy, another one of those shared values of efficiency that I now realized was a lie. She didn't care about efficiency. She cared about the thrill of the spend, the rush of the steal. I entered the dining room. The scene was exactly as I had left it hours ago. A frozen tableau of humiliation. The beef Wellington was a tragedy on a platter. The puff pastry, which I had scored with such care to create a perfect lattice pattern, was now soggy and collapsed, sitting in a pool of congealed demi-glace that had formed a skin on the surface. The roasted vegetables had shriveled. The candles were nothing but puddles of hardened wax on the linen tablecloth, a tablecloth we had bought in Provence 5 years ago. I stared at it. Of my love. I moved with mechanical efficiency. I picked up the heavy ceramic platter. It weighed 5 pounds, maybe 6. I walked into the kitchen and opened the trash compactor. I didn't scrape the food off. I slid the entire meal, meat, pastry, vegetable. It landed a wet, heavy thud. A distinct sound, the sound of waste. I scraped the plates. I rinsed the wine glasses, watching the liquid swirl down the drain, diluting until it ran clear. I loaded the dishwasher. I wiped the table. I folded the wax-stained tablecloth, shoved it deep into the laundry hamper, burying it under towels, so I wouldn't have to look at it. By 6:15 a.m., dining room was erased. It looked as if no anniversary had ever been planned. It looked like a model home, pristine, sterile and empty. I went upstairs to the master bathroom. I needed to wash the night off me. I needed to wash her off me, though she wasn't even there. I turned the shower to the hottest setting. I stepped in and let the scalding water beat against my neck, my shoulders, my face. I stood there for 10 minutes, eyes closed, breathing in the steam. I visualized the water stripping away the shock, the grief, the rage. I imagined my emotions as data packets, corrupted files that needed to be quarantined. File anger, status, quarantined. File love, status, corrupted, deleted. File hope, status, error core through 4. When I stepped out, the mirror was fogged. I wiped a circle in the glass and looked at myself. I looked normal. That was the terrifying part. I looked exactly the same as I had today. The betrayal hadn't turned my skin green or grown me a second head. I was just Arthur. I shaved. I applied the aftershave she liked, sandalwood and bergamot. I dressed in my Saturday casual, dark selvage denim, wolves. I was constructing a costume, was putting on the skin of the oblivious, trusting husband. 6:45 a.m. I went back downstairs to the kitchen. This was the critical hour, the golden hour of deception. I started the coffee ritual. We had a technivore mochamuster, a piece of Dutch engineering that brewed coffee at 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Elena loved it. She claimed she could taste the difference if the water was 2 degrees off. I ground the beans. Whirrah. The sound was aggressive, tearing through the silence. I poured the water. I set the filter. Drip. Drip. The smell of roasted Ethiopian gechef. The kitchen. It was a comforting smell, a smell of domestic stability. It was a lie. Then, I heard it. 6:58 a.m. The distinct rumble of a car engine outside. Not the aggressive growl of a sports car, but the polite hum of a luxury rideshare. She hadn't driven her own car. She had taken a car service. Smart. Drinking at the client dinner meant no driving. I heard the heavy thud of a car door closing. Then the click of heels on the wet pavement. My heart rate spiked 110, 120 beats per minute. I forced a deep breath. Calm, I commanded myself. You are not a husband. You are a surveillance device. The front door lock tumbled. Click. The deadbolt slid back. Clack. The door opened, bringing with it a damp, cold Seattle air. Arthur. Voice. It hit me harder than I expected. It was the same voice that had whispered vows to me, the same voice that had laughed at my terrible jokes, the same voice that had cried when we found out she'd conceive. It sounded tired. It sounded innocent. I turned from the counter, a mug of coffee in my hand. I arranged my face into a mask of gentle concern. I softened my eyes. I relaxed my jaw. In the kitchen, I called out. War. She looked destroyed, but not in the person is destroyed by guilt. She looked destroyed by exhaustion. Her blonde hair, usually blown out to perfection, was pulled back in a messy, low bun. Her makeup was still there, but the foundation had settled into the fine lines around her eyes, and her mascara was slightly smudged on the lower lid. She was wearing her charcoal power suit, the skirt slightly wrinkled at the hip from sitting for hours. But the smell that hit me first. As she crossed the threshold of the kitchen, the air shifted. Beneath the scent of coffee and rain, there was something else. Chemically floral scent. It wasn't her perfume alone, wood sage and sea salt. It was cheaper, industrial soap, the kind you find in a hotel dispenser. She had showered, but not here. Hey, she breathed, dropping her leather tote bag onto the breakfast nook bench with a heavy sigh. She didn't come to immediately. She went to the sink and poured herself a glass of water, downing it in one long, desperate gulp. Rough night, I asked. My voice was steady. The voice of a man who suspects nothing. She turned to face me, wiping a droplet of water from her lip. Her eyes met mine. For a microsecond, I saw a flicker fear, assessment, but it vanished instantly, replaced by a weary smile. You have no idea, she said. The pitch deck was a disaster. Julian made us rewrite the entirety from scratch at 10 p.m. We didn't even start the rehearsal until midnight. Lie. At 10 p.m., she was ordering room service champagne. At midnight, she was texting him about how much she hated my cooking. That sounds brutal, I said, stepping closer. I forced myself to invade her space, to play the role of the affectionate partner. Did you guys at least land it? We present on Monday, she said, leaning back against the counter, creating a subtle barrier between us. She crossed her arms. Defensive posture. But I think we salvaged it. Julian is intense. But he knows what he's doing. He's a perfectionist. I agreed, nodding sympathetically. That's why he's the managing director. Exactly. She exhaled, her shoulders dropping. God, I'm sorry about last night, Arthur. The anniversary. I'm terrible. I saw your text, but I couldn't even pick up my phone. It was that kind of war room atmosphere. Lie. She ignored my texts because her phone was face down on a bedside table in the Fairmont. It's okay, I said, and I smiled. It was the hardest thing I ever done physically. I forced the zag major muscles to contract. I forced the orbicularis oculi crinkle slightly at the corners of my eyes. A Duchenne smile. A genuine fake. We've been married 12 years. One dinner doesn't make or break us. I put the food away. We can celebrate this weekend. Maybe go to that Italian place in Ballard? She flinched. It was tiny, a twitch of the left eyelid. But I saw it. Or maybe the annoyance that I was still trying, still planning a future she had already opted out of. That would be nice, she said. Voice sounding hollow. You're too good to me, Arthur. Really. I made you coffee, I said, sliding the mug across the granite islander. Ethiopian. Just the way you like it. Black, no sugar. She stared at the mug. Steam curled off the black surface. For a moment she looked at it as if it were a trap. As if I had poisoned it. Thanks, she whispered. She picked it up with both hands, using the heat to warm her fingers. She brought it to her lips and took a sip. So, I said, turning back to the coffee machine to pour my own cup, deliberately turning my back to her, give her a false sense of security. What's the plan for the weekend? If the pitch is Monday, are you going to be working through? Probably, she said to my back. Who wants to do a final run-through on Sunday? I might have to go into the office for a few hours. Sunday. I accessed the mental file from last night. Sunday text log. We can take the boat out Sunday. Arthur watches football all day. He won't even notice I'm gone. Well, I'll keep the house quiet for you, I said, turning around. I've got some reading catch up on anyway. And the Seahawks are playing, so I'll probably just be glued to the TV. I fed her the line she expected. I gave her the permission she needed. She smiled, and this time it looked almost genuine. Relief. She thought she was safe. She thought I was the same predictable, boring fixture I had always been. The furniture of her life. You're the best, she said. She took another sip of coffee, then set the mug down. I feel gross. I feel like I have stale office air stuck to my skin. Stale office air. Or the scent of another man. Go ahead, I said. Take your time. I'll make breakfast. Avocado toast. She paused. The offer was another test. The avocado toast was our thing. Sunday mornings. A ritual. She hesitated. I'm not really hungry. My stomach is kind of in knots from the stress. Just a little bit, I pressed gently. You need the fuel. Protein and healthy fats. Brain food for the big pitch. She looked at me for any sign of sarcasm. She found none. Okay, she relented. Maybe just one piece. Give me 20 minutes? Take 30, I said. She grabbed her bag and walked out of the kitchen. I listened to her footsteps on the stairs. Thump, thump. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close upstairs. Then I waited until I heard the water running in the master bath. The second shower she would take in the last 2 hours. The moment the water started, the mask dropped. My face went slack. The exhaustion crashed into me like a physical blow. I gripped the edge of the granite counter so hard my knuckles turned white. The marble was cold, unyielding. It grounded me. I looked at the mug she had left on the counter. Her lipstick, a shade of berry red, that was slightly smeared, stained the rim. I wasn't just losing my wife. I was realizing I had never really known her. The woman who just stood in my kitchen looked me in the eye and lied about her war room deadline was a stranger. My wife's face, wife's voice, and my wife's memories. And was a criminal. I walked over to her side of the island. Her phone wasn't there. She had taken it to the bathroom. Of course she had. But she had left her tote bag on the bench. I looked up at the ceiling. The sound of the shower was a steady hiss. I had 10 minutes, maybe 15. I walked over to the bag. It was a Celine phantom bag, structured and deep. I didn't rummage frantically. I moved with method. I peered inside. Laptop, notebook, a tangled charger, a cosmetic pouch, and a folded piece of paper shoved hastily into the side pocket. I reached in with 2 fingers and extracted the paper. I unfolded it on the counter, smoothing it out. It was receipt from a parking garage. Downtown Seattle, 4th Avenue Garage, entry 1830, exit 0615. Standard. Except 4th Avenue wasn't near her office. Her office was in Pioneer Square. 4th Avenue was near the hotel district. But beneath the receipt was something else. A small, crumpled carbon slip. I picked it up. The Emerald City Jeweler. Repair ticket for $3 Item, men's Rolex Submariner. Customer. Vance. Notes, engraving removal. My. Hitched. I didn't own a Rolex Submariner. I wore an Omega Speedmaster. She wasn't just buying him gifts. She was paying to have an engraving removed from a watch. Was it a used watch? A vintage find? Or, I realized with a sick jolt, it was Julian's watch. She was taking his watch in for repairs, using her name, engraving, removal. What did the engraving say? To Julian, love Sarah? Was she erasing his wife from his wrist? I took my phone from my pocket. I snapped a high-resolution photo of the parking receipt. I snapped a photo of the repair ticket. Then, I carefully refolded the papers and slid them back into the exact pocket where I found them, ensuring the creases aligned. Back. I went to the pantry and pulled out a loaf of sourdough bread. I took out 2 avocados. I retrieved the red pepper flakes and the sea salt. I toast the bread. As the toaster hummed, I stared out the window at the rain. The gray was lightening, just a fraction. The world was waking up. Neighbors were walking dogs. Cars were splashing through puddles. To anyone looking through the window, I was a loving husband making breakfast for his hardworking wife. A scene of domestic tranquility, but inside my head, I was calculating. Asset value of Julian Thorne's watch. Approx. $12,000. $450 method of payment. The joint credit card she thought I didn't check until the end of the month. I checked my banking app. Pending transaction. Emerald City Jeweler. $4.50. Confirmed. The toaster popped. Chunk. I took the warm bread out. I sliced the avocado. I spread it thick, green and creamy against the dark crust. I sprinkled the salt. I added the pepper flakes. I plated it. Good china. The Wegwood. I heard. Stop upstairs. I looked at the 2 plates of toast. One for me. One for her. Enjoy it, Elena. I whispered to the empty room. It's the last meal you'll ever have in this house that isn't paid for with lies. I heard the hairdryer start. The whine of the motor. I took a bite of my own toast. It tasted like ash. I chewed it anyway. I swallowed. The masquerade had to be perfect. If I wanted to catch a wolf, I had to wear the sheepskin so tight it drew blood. I picked up my phone and opened a secure browser. I typed in a name I had found in the depths of the internet during my frantic research last night. Sarah Thorne, partner, Ascended Legal Group. I stared at her headshot on the law firm's website. She was striking. Sharp features, dark hair, eyes that looked like they could cut glass. She looked formidable. Like a weapon. I found her work email address. I didn't email her yet. That was too risky. I needed to make contact in person. I needed to see her face when I destroyed her life, so I could gauge if she would be an ally or a liability. I noted her office address. 1201 3rd Avenue. I would pay her a visit. Not today. Today was for the performance. Today was for the masquerade. The stairs creaked. Elena was coming down. I put the phone away. I picked up the coffee pot. I put the smile back on my face. Breakfast is served. I called out, my voice bright, cheerful, and completely dead. She walked in, wrapped in a plush white robe, her hair wet and combed back. She looked cleaner, softer. She looked like my wife if again. Smells amazing, she said, sitting down at the island. She picked up the toast. You really are the best, Arthur. Try, I said. She took a bite. Perfect. I'm glad. Watching her chew. I just want you to be happy, Elle. That's all I've ever wanted. She stopped chewing for a second. A shadow passed over her face. Guilt? Regret? I am happy, she lied. Good, I said. Because happiness is important. It's the only thing that matters in the end. I took a sip of my coffee. Analysis. Target is relaxed. Defenses are lowered. Suspects nothing. Next step. Initiate phase 2. So, I said casually, I was thinking of heading downtown later. Maybe swing by the market, pick up some fresh fish for dinner. Since we missed it. Oh, she said, wiping a crumb from her lip. That sounds great. I'll probably just nap while you're gone. Perfect, I said. Rest up. You've got a big week ahead. A peak, indeed. I finished my coffee, the bitter taste grounding me. I looked at the woman I'd promised to love, honor, and cherish, and I realized that I was still honoring my vows. I was cherishing the truth. And I would love the justice I was about to serve. More coffee? I asked. Please, she said, holding out her cup. I poured. The dark liquid swirled, filling the cup to the brim. I said. She didn't say anything, just watched the cup fill. When, she softly, just before it overflowed. Perfect timing, I said. Perfect timing. The front door of the townhouse clicked shut behind me, sealing Elena inside her fortress of lies. Standing on the front porch, I didn't move immediately. I let the Seattle rain wash over me. It was a cold, driving drizzle that soaked through my gray cashmere sweater within seconds, chilling the skin, but I welcomed it. Inside that house, the air had been humidity and deceit, recycled and stale. Out here, the air tasted of wet asphalt, pine needles, and the distinct, metallic tang of the Puget Sound. It tasted like reality. I walked to my car, a charcoal Audi A6 parked in the driveway. I unlocked it, the lights flashing a welcoming morning. Sliding into the driver's seat felt like a cockpit. This was my domain. No one else drove this car. No passengers. No perfume. Just the smell of leather and the faint, comforting scent of sanitized order. I placed my phone in the center console, but I didn't start the engine yet. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, watching the raindrops race each other down the windshield. Phase 1, the discovery, was complete. Phase 2, the masquerade, was active and holding. Now came Phase 3, acquisition of leverage. In the world of forensic accounting, leverage is not about what you know, it is about who else needs to know it. Information is potential energy. It only becomes kinetic when it's released into the right environment. And Sarah Thorne was the environment. I knew Sarah Thorne by reputation only. A partner at a Sen legal group. A litigator who specialized in high-stakes contract law. She was known as the Barracuda in local legal circles, a nickname that usually implied a temperament that was aggressive, relentless, and devoid of empathy. She was a woman who billed $800 an hour to destroy people's livelihoods in court. And she was currently married to man. With my wife. I started the engine. The dashboard lit up, a constellation of glowing dials. I reversed out of the driveway, glancing up at the master bedroom window one last time. The curtains were drawn. Elena was likely asleep, dreaming of Costa Rica, or perhaps texting Julian that the boring husband had left the building. I drove toward downtown, merging onto I-5 South. The traffic was light for a Saturday, a steady stream of gray sedans and SUVs moving sluggishly under the overcast sky. I kept the radio off. I needed to think. I couldn't just walk into her office. I couldn't just call her. A woman like Sarah Thorne had gatekeepers' assistants, June associates, receptionists. Sole job was to filter out the noise. And to her, I was noise. I was a stranger. If I approached her incorrectly, She would view me as a threat, a stalker, or a nuisance. She would shut down. She would lawyer up. I needed to bypass her defenses. I needed to present myself not as a problem, but as the solution to a problem she didn't know she had yet. I took the exit for the International District. I wasn't going to her office. Not yet. First, I had to prepare the package. I parked in a garage near South Jackson Street and walked 3 blocks to a high-end print shop that I knew was open on weekends. It was a place usually frequented by architects and graphic designers. The kind of place that used heavy bond paper and high-resolution laser printers. I logged onto a rental terminal. I inserted the encrypted USB I had carried in my pocket, digital backup of last night's harvest. I didn't print everything. Overwhelming her would be a tactical error. I needed a sampler. Tasting menu of betrayal. I selected 5 documents. The log, a transcript of the text messages from the night of July 14th, highlighting the discussion of the shell company in Belize. The money, a spreadsheet analysis of the unauthorized wire transfers from Julian's department. Cross-reference with consulting fees, paid to a P.O. box, registered in Elena's maiden name. The asset, the photograph of the parking garage receipt, and the watch repair ticket I had found in Elena's bag less than an hour ago. The photo, a single, grainy image I had recovered from Elena's deleted items folder, a selfie of the 2 of them in a hotel bed, champagne glasses in hand, time stamped during a supposed client conference in Portland. The ledger, a summary of Julian's personal withdrawals from their joint checking account, labeled investment capital, which actually funneled into the travel agency booking their flights to San Jose. I printed them on 32mm linen paper. It felt substantial in the hand. Authoritative. This wasn't a ranting letter from a jealous. This was a dossier. This was evidence. I purchased a simple, matte black presentation folder. I arranged the dunce inside. The photo first, emotional hook. The watch ticket second, financial hook. The ledger third, criminal hook. I walked out of the print shop with the folder under my arm. The rain had intensified, drumming against the awnings of the old brick buildings. I checked my watch. 10:15 a.m. Sarah Thorne was a creature of habit. I had done my reconnaissance in the early hours of the morning, scouring her social media and her firm's public appearance. On Saturday mornings, she didn't go to the office immediately. She went to her spin class in Capitol Hill, finishing at 10 a.m., and then she usually held court at a coffee shop near her firm to review case files before heading home. But I didn't want a coffee shop. Coffee shops are loud. They are chaotic. They are public. I needed ground that was neutral, quiet, and slightly disarming. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for the Panama Hotel Tea Room. It was a historic landmark in the International District, a place with deep roots in Seattle's past. It was dimly lit, quasi-library, and smelled of history and matcha. It was a place where people went to whisper. I need a table for 2 in the back corner, I told the host. I'll be there in 20 minutes, and I need privacy. We can. That, sir. Good. Now, the contact. I sat in my car, rain blurring the world outside. I opened my email app. I composed a new message from an anonymous, encrypted account I used for sensitive audits. To sthorne@ascendlegal.com. Subject: compliance issue. Project Horizon personal asset liability. Bowdy. Miss Thorne. I am in possession of financial and digital records regarding a substantial misappropriation of funds involving your husband, Julian Thorne, and a direct report named Elena Vance. This activity exposes you personally to joint liability for wire fraud, embezzlement. It also concerns the current location of your grandfather's Rolex Submariner. I am not a blackmailer. I am not a reporter. I am the husband of the co-conspirator. I am currently at the Panama Hotel tea room in the International District. I have a folder of evidence on the table. You have 45 minutes before I consider turning this over to the state attorney's office. I suggest you come alone. Ideally, we can solve this without an indictment. For us. The auditor. I attached the photo of the watch repair ticket, just that one image. The bait. Send. The digital packet flew through the ether, bouncing off a cell tower, routing through a server, and landing with a ping in the pocket of a woman who thought her biggest problem today was a sore hamstring from spin class. I put the phone down. My hands were steady. My heart rate was 62 beats per minute. I drove the short distance to the tea room. I parked. I walked in. The Panama Hotel tea room was exactly as I remembered. The floorboards creaked with history. The lighting was low, filtered through sepia-toned shades. Black and white photos of pre-war Seattle lined the walls, ghosts of a community that had been displaced, lives that had been interrupted. It was a fitting setting for what was about to happen. I took the table in the back corner, secluded by a wooden screen. I ordered a pot of genmaicha brown rice tea, nutty, savory, grounding. I placed the black folder on the table. I placed my phone next to it, face down. I poured a cup of tea. The steam rose in a delicate, swirling column. And I waited. Time is a weapon if you know how to wield it. I watched the minutes tick by on my Omega. 10:05 a.m., 10:40 a.m., 10:25 a.m. At 10:48 a.m., the bell above the door chimed. The atmosphere in the room shifted. A gust of wind entered, followed by a figure that seemed to suck the oxygen out of the space. Sarah Thorne. She was formidable. Even in weekend casual, she looked like she was dressed for war. She wore a trench coat that cost more than my first car, belted tightly at the waist. Her black hair was pulled back in a severe, sleek ponytail that pulled her features tight. Her eyes were hidden behind oversized sunglasses. Despite the gloom of the day, she carried a designer bag like a shield and walked with a stride that wasted no energy. She scanned the room. Her head moved with predatory precision. Right. She saw me, the solitary man in the corner with the black folder. She didn't hesitate. She marched toward my table, her boots clicking sharply on the hardwood. The sound was distinct click, click, getting louder, closing the distance. She stopped at the edge of the table. She loomed over me. She didn't take off her sunglasses. You have exactly 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't have you arrested for harassment, she said. Her voice was low, smoky, and laced with razor blades. I didn't stand up. I didn't smile. I didn't offer a handshake. I simply gestured to the chair opposite me. Sit down, Sarah, I said. My voice was calm, contrasting her aggression. The tea is hot. And your HUD is currently charging a $3,000 weekend at the Fairmont to a shell company in Belize. I think you'll want to see the receipts. She stood there, frozen, for 3 seconds. I could see her calculating. She was a lawyer. She was assessing the credibility of the witness. She looked at the folder. She looked at me. She looked at the empty chair. Then, slowly, she reached up and removed her sunglasses. Her eyes were striking a piercing, icy blue. But they were rimmed with red. She hadn't been crying. She was exhausted. The same exhaustion I had seen in the mirror this morning. The exhaustion of a person who suspects the ground is crumbling beneath them but refuses to look down. Who are you? She asked, her voice losing some of its edge, replaced by a cautious curiosity. I'm Arthur Vance, I said. I'm a forensic accountant, and until last night, I thought I was happily married. I tapped the black folder with my index finger. This is the autopsy of our marriages, I said. Do you want to open it, or should I? She stared at the folder. Her hand twitched her side. The barracuda was hesitating. She pulled the chair out and sat down. She kept her coat buttoned. She placed her bag on the floor, keeping it close to her legs. "Show me," she whispered. The folder. The first thing she saw was the photo. The selfie. Julian and Elena, drunk on champagne lust, tangled in sheets that weren't ours. Sarah didn't flinch. She stared at the image, her face a mask of stone. She was trained to look at crime scene photos, at contract breaches, at disaster. She didn't look away. "Cute," she said, her voice flat. "But infidelity isn't a crime, Arthur. It's just disappointed expectations. If you brought me here to show me my husband is a cheater, you've wasted my billing time. I've suspected for months. Keep reading." Gently, turn the page. She turned to the second document. The ledger. Her eyes scanned the columns. Dates, amounts, vendor names. $4,500. Apex Consulting. Bly's, $800. Strategic LLC Cayman, $12,000. Vinch Horology Repair, Seattle. Her finger on the watch repair line. "That's my grandfather's watch," she said softly. "He told me he lost it at the gym. He filed an insurance claim. He didn't lose it," I corrected. "Higena. She's having the engraving removed. To Julian, my North Star. That was the inscription, wasn't it?" Sarah looked up. Ice in her eyes cracked. Pain leaked through. "Yes," she breathed. "That was the inscription." "He's erasing you, Sarah," I said. "But that's not the worst part. Look at the source of funds." I pointed the column on the far right. "These aren't personal withdrawals. These are corporate expense diversions. He's embezzling from his department to fund their new life. And since he's positing some of the overflow into your joint high-yield savings account to hide it, you are technically laundering money." The lawyer in her snapped into focus. Her eyes widened. She grabbed the paper, pulling it closer, reading the fine print, the routing numbers. "Son of a bitch," she hissed. "He's mixing the streams. If the SEC sees this, you lose your license." I finished for her. "You lose your partnership. You lose the house. You federal prison for aiding and abetting." She dropped the paper as if it were burning. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear. Genuine, naked fear. "He's going to ruin me," she said. "He's going to take everything I built." "Not if we get ahead of it," I said. I leaned forward. I poured her a cup of tea. She watched the liquid fill the cup, mesmerized. "I have the evidence," I said. "I have the timeline. I have the motive. But I need one thing to seal the coffin." "What?" she asked. "Access," I said. "I can see the transfers going out, but I can't see where they land. I need the passwords to his private encryption key for the offshore portal. He keeps it on a physical drive, doesn't he? Or a secure cloud vault?" She nodded slowly. "He has a server at home. In his study. It's biometrically locked. I have the emergency override code. He gave it to me years ago for our estate planning in case he died. We're going to use it," I said. "Because as far as we're concerned, the man you married is dead." She looked at the tea. She picked up the cup. Her hand was shaking, just slightly. The vibration caused ripples in the green liquid. She took a sip. She swallowed. She set the cup down hard. The china clattered against the saucer. When she looked up again, the fear was gone. The barracuda was back. And she was hungry. "I want him destroyed," she said. Her voice was no longer flat. It was cold fire. "I don't just want a divorce. I want him in an orange jumpsuit. I want him to die penniless." "We can do that," I said. "But we have to be surgical. No screaming matches. No confrontations. You have to go home and pretend everything is fine. Can you do that?" She let out a dry, bitter laugh. "Arthur, I'm a litigator. I lie for a living. I can smile while I twist the knife." "Good. 'Cause I need you to get that code, tonight." "I'll get it," she promised. "What about your wife, Elena?" "Elena is a liability. She signed the fraudulent invoice. She's the fall guy. Julian set her up. If this goes down, she goes down with him." Sarah looked at me, studying my face. "And you're okay with that? Sending your wife to prison?" I looked out the window at the rain. I thought about the beef Wellington in the trash. I thought about the crushing deadline. I thought about the 12 years of life that were now just a preamble to this disaster. She made her choice, I said. Now I'm making mine. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a burner phone. I slid it across the table to her. Use this, I said. Don't text me from your personal phone. Don't email me from work. Once you have the code, send it to the number saved in contacts. Then destroy this phone. She took the device. What do we call this? She asked. A partnership. An audit. We're balancing the books. She stood up, buttoning her coat, the armor back in place. I'll get you the code by midnight. I'll be waiting. She turned and walked out of the tea shop. She didn't look back. I paid the bill in cash and walked back to my car. The rain had softened to a mist, but the city felt sharper, clearer. The drive back was a blur. I stopped at Pike Place Market, not because I wanted to, but because Arthur would have. I bought a pound of fresh halibut. When I pulled into the driveway at 1:30 p.m., the house was silent. Elena was on the living room sofa, curled under a throw laptop open. She jumped when I entered, the reflex of the guilty. Market was a zoo, I said, holding up the fish. Pan-seared tonight? Sounds perfect. She lied, forcing a smile. The rest of the afternoon was a study in excruciating normalcy. We existed in the same square footage, separated by an ocean of secrets. At 6 p.m., I cooked. I seasoned the fish, heated the oil, and played the role. Arthur, she said, leaning against the kitchen counter with a glass of Pinot Grigio. I was thinking, about next month. If we land this client, the bonus is significant. Maybe we should take it. A real one. Costa Rica, maybe? I froze for a fraction of a second. Costa Rica. The location from the text logs. Costa Rica, I repeated, tasting the words. Sounds humid. I was thinking maybe we renovate the kitchen instead. New cabinets. Something permanent. She flinched at the word permanent. She said, looking down into her wine. Renovations. Smart. We ate in the kitchen. We talked about the weather. We talked about the Seahawks. We talked about everything except the impending demolition of our lives. At 10 p.m. she went to bed. I have to be up early for prep with Julian. Kissing my cheek. Her lips were dry. I waited until the house settled. Then I went to my study. 11:45 p.m. I sat in the dark, staring at the encrypted laptop. 11:58 p.m. The screen refreshed. Incoming message. User. Unknown subject. Delivery. Attached was a single image file, a photo of a computer screen Julian's private server interface. In the center, a dialog box, system log byte 7-9-B22 Omega 44. Below it, a message. He was in the shower. I told him I needed to check our joint portfolio. He typed it in right in front of me. Burn him to the ground, Arthur. I deleted the message. I had the key. I opened a Tor browser, navigated to the illicit client portal, and entered the credentials. Granted, the screen flooded with data. It was beautiful in its complexity. Julian had built a parallel accounting structure. Project Horizon, $150,000 diverted. Marketing Q3, $75,000 diverted. And there, in the authorized signatories folder, were the PDFs. Invoice 1992, approved by Julian Thorne, countersigned by Elena Vance. Her signature, distinctive, and a note in the margins per discussion on 7th priority transfer. She was active. She was directing traffic. I downloaded everything: bank routings, shell registrations, signed PDFs. I compiled it all into a single file. The audit final zip says 4.2 gigabytes. I leaned back in my chair. The adrenaline faded, replaced by cold certainty. I had enough to send them both away for a decade. I closed the laptop and went upstairs. I undressed in the dark and climbed into bed next to my wife. She was warm, smelling of lavender, breathing deeply. Sleep well, Elena, I thought, staring at the ceiling. It's the last peaceful night you'll ever have. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. The auditor never sleeps when the books are open. Monday passed with the sickening sweetness of a rotting fruit. Elena went to work early, fueled by adrenaline and the false promise of a new life. She returned late, flushed with victory. They had nailed the pitch. The client loved the strategy. Julian had popped champagne in the conference room. I listened to her recount the details over a dinner of takeout Thai food. I watched her hands move, animated and graceful, and I imagined them in handcuffs. Julian says this puts us on the map. She beamed, scooped jasmine rice onto her fork. The bonus structure is going to be even better than we thought. That's incredible, Elle, I said, my voice steady. You two make a dangerous team. We do, she agreed, missing the double meaning entirely. We really do. Tuesday arrived gray and weeping. The rain had returned, turning the Seattle skyline into a smudge of charcoal and steel. I left for work before she did. I kissed her forehead while she slept, a Judas kiss that tasted of finality. I arrived at my office at Hammond and Schuyler at 8 a.m. My corner office, on the 4th floor, overlooked the Puget Sound. Usually the view of the ferries cutting through the dark water calmed me. Today I didn't look out the window. I sat at my desk. I placed my secure, encrypted laptop on the mahogany surface. I connected to a tiered proxy server in Switzerland. The email client. To ethics@meridianglobal.com, the parent company of an agency. CC, internal audit at meridian.com. Vance at SEC.gov, secure whistleblower tip line. Urgent disclosure, embezzlement and fraud, Julian Thorne, Elena Vance. Attachment, the audit final zip 4.2 gigabytes. Body, to the Director of Compliance. Attached is a comprehensive forensic dossier, a systemic embezzlement scheme within your Seattle marketing division. The evidence includes 1. Unauthorized diversion of Project Horizon funds to offshore shell entities, Belize, Cayman. 2. Falsified vendor signed by Managing Director Julian Thorne and countersigned by Senior Strategist Elena Vance. 3. Chat logs confirming conspiracy to defraud and intent to flee jurisdiction. 4. Digital keys to the private server hosting the illicit ledger. The total appropriation exceeds $350,000 to date. Regard this as a formal notification. The SEC has been copied. The auditor. I hover my finger over the enter key. There is a specific weight to the moment before you destroy a life. It is heavy and strangely quiet. I thought about the 12 years. I thought about the weekend trips to the San Juan Islands. I thought about the way she used to look at me before I became boring. Then I thought about the text message. He's so predictable. It's suffocating. Enter. Sent. The digital packet disintegrated into data streams, rushing through fiber optic cables at the speed of light. It was done. The fuse was lit. I closed the laptop and locked it in my safe. I switched to my work computer and began my day, reviewing spreadsheets for a mid-sized logistics firm. I worked with mechanical efficiency. 9 a.m. passed. Silence. 10 a.m. passed. Silence. The corporate machine is slow to wake up, but when it moves with crushing weight. At 10:42 a.m., my phone, the one linked to the cloud backup of Elena's device, vibrated. Vibrate. I picked it up. A text from Julian to Elena. Julian, 10:42 a.m. Where are you? Come to my office. Now. Elena, 10:43 a.m. I'm in the creative review. What's wrong? Julian, 10:03 a.m. No. I leaned back in my chair, watching the screen. The show was starting. Vibrate. Elena, 10:55 a.m. Why is IT locking my terminal? I can't log in. Julian, 10:56 a.m. Don't text me. They're here. Elena, 10:56 a.m. Who is here? Julian, 10:57 a.m. Legal. Security. They just walked in with a court order. They seized my hard drive. Elena, they know about Belize. Elena, 10:58 a.m. That's impossible. We were careful. Julian, 10:58 a.m. Someone talked. Delete everything on your phone. Hide the message cut off. The connection dropped. They had likely confiscated his phone. I watched the typing bubble appear on Elena's side, then disappear. Then appear again. Panic in digital form. I sat there, sipping my lukewarm coffee. I felt a cold, dark satisfaction spreading through my chest. It wasn't happiness. It was the feeling of an acquainting out. Zero sum. At 11:15 a.m., my personal cell phone rang. Caller. Elena. I let it ring 3 times. Calculated delay. Make her sweat. Make her wonder. I answered. On the 4th ring. Hey, honey, I said, my voice casual, light. Everything okay? I'm in the middle of a review. Arthur. Her voice was a jagged shard of glass. Breathless. Hysterical. Arthur, you have to come get me. What? Slow down. What's going on? Something terrible is happening, she sobbed. I could hear background noise voices, phones ringing, the distinct sound of chaos. Security is escorting me out. Oh my God, Arthur, they're saying I stole money. Who is saying that? Urgency into my tone. The auditors. They have police downstairs. They arrested Julian right in the lodging. Down. A guttural sound of pure terror. I don't understand. I didn't do anything. Julian must have done something and blamed me. The lie came so easily to her. Even now, standing on the precipice, she was trying to spin the narrative. Okay, Elena, listen to me, I said, channeling the calm, supportive husband. Don't say anyone. Where are you now? I'm on the sidewalk. They took my badge. They took my laptop. They gave me my purse and told me to leave the premises pending an investigation. No, not yet. But the police officer said I need to stay in the city. Arthur, I'm scared. I'm shaking. I'm leaving work now, I lied. Go home. Do not go to Julian's. Do not call him. Just go home and lock the door. I'll meet you there. Okay. Please hurry. I'm coming. Hung up. I didn't leave immediately. I finished my review of the logistics spreadsheet. I checked my email. I went to the break room and had a glass of water. I wanted her to sit in that empty house alone for a while. I wanted her to sit in the silence I had lived in for months. At 12:30 p.m., I finally left the building. When I arrived at the townhouse, it was raining harder. The sky was a bruise. I walked inside. Elena was sitting at the kitchen island, the same spot where she had eaten the avocado toast yesterday. She was still wearing her coat. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in black ribs. Her hands were gripping a glass of water, so hard her knuckles were white. She looked up when I entered. Her eyes were wild, desperate. Arthur. She practically fell off the stool. She buried her face in my chest, sobbing. It's a nightmare. Tell me it's a nightmare. I stood there. I didn't wrap my arms around her. I let my hands hang by my sides. She pulled back, confused by my lack of response. She looked at my face. Arthur? I know, I said. You know? You saw the news. Is it on the news already? No. Calmly. I know. I walked past her, toward the kitchen counter. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the black folder, the copy of the one I had given Sarah. I tossed it onto the granite. It landed with a heavy slap. What is this? She whispered. Open it. She reached out with a trembling hand. She opened the folder. She saw the photo of her and Julian in bed. She saw the text logs about the Shell company. She saw the crushing deadline text next to the GPS timestamp of the Fairmont Hotel. She saw the copy of the whistleblower email I had sent 3 hours ago. The color drained from her face so completely she looked like a corpse. She stopped breathing. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. She looked at me. The confusion was gone. The fear was gone. Replaced by a horrific realization. You, she whispered. It was you. The auditor, I corrected gently. You did this. You sent this? Her voice rose to a shriek. You destroyed my life? No, Elena, I said, leaning against the counter, crossing my arms. You destroyed your life. I just documented it. Why? She screamed. Why didn't you just divorce me? Why didn't you just yell at me? Why did you have to burn it all down? Because you didn't just break a vow, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. You started. You looked me in the eye every morning and planned how to spend my money with another man in Costa Rica. You treated me like a line item to be erased. I took us closer to her. I don't get mad, Elena. I get even. And the math always balances out. She stared at me, trembling. She looked at the door, then back at me. I'm going to leave, her voice shaking. I'm going to get a lawyer. I'm going to tell them you hacked me. That this is inadmissible. You can try, I said. But the server logs are already with the SEC. And Sarah Thorne has already given the police the encryption key. It's over. I pointed to the door. The police will probably be here within the hour to formally charge you. Conspiracy, wire fraud, embezzlement. I'd suggest you pack a bag. Comfortable clothes. No belts, no shoelaces. She looked at me one last time. There was no love left in her eyes. Only hatred. Pure, unadulterated hatred. You're a monster, she spat. I'm a forensic accountant, I replied. You're a liability I just wrote off. She grabbed her purse and ran out the front door. I heard car start, the engine revving aggressively as she sped away into the rain. I stood in the kitchen. I walked over to the coffee machine. I cleaned the filter. I wiped down the counter where the folder had rested. Then, I went to the living room and sat in my armchair. I watched the rain streak the windows. The house was quiet, finally, truly quiet. The audit was complete. The books were closed. She didn't make it to Costa Rica. She didn't even make it to the state line. Elena was arrested 40 minutes after fleeing our driveway. An automatic license plate reader, Alper, flagged her Audi on I-5 South near Tacoma. With a warrant already issued for conspiracy and flight risk, the state troopers didn't take chances. They boxed her in. I didn't see it happen, but I read the police report later. It was clinical, lacking the drama she probably felt. Subject compliant distressed. No weapons found. Transported to King County Jail. That night, the house was silent in a way it had never been before. It wasn't the silence of anticipation or tension. It was the silence. The air felt thin. I sat in the living room, surrounded by the objects of our life, the mid-century lamp, the expensive rug, the art we had bought in Paris. They felt like props on a struck stage. I ordered a pizza. I ate 2 slices. I went to sleep. The next 6 months were a blur of legal motions, depositions, and discovery phases. The legal system is a slow, grinding machine, but when fueled by irrefutable evidence, it is merciless. I filed for divorce the morning after her arrest. I had criminal misconduct and dissipation of marital assets. My lawyer, a shamed Harrison who charged $600 an hour, told me it was the cleanest case he'd ever seen. She has no leverage, Arthur, Harrison told me, tapping a file on his desk. She used funds to facilitate, or freezing her access to everything. She won't get a dime of alimony. She'll be lucky if she leaves with her clothes. Good, I said. Draft it. Elena tried to call me from the detention center twice. I didn't answer. I listened to the voicemails once, then archived them. First voicemail, Arthur, please. I can't stay here. It's cold. Please just post bail. I'll sign whatever you want. Second voicemail. Promised to love me in sickness. This is sickness, Arthur. I was sick. Julian brainwashed me. I deleted the files from my phone, kept the backups on the server. Evidence of admission. I was sick. An admission of guilt cloaked in victimhood. The trial, State of Washington v. Julian Thorne and Elena Vance, began in November. It wasn't a long trial. The prosecution didn't need theatrics. They had my spreadsheet. They had the server Sarah obtained. They had the signed invoices. I attended every day. I sat in the back row, wearing my charcoal suit. My expression. I was the ghost at their funeral. Julian looked like a husk of the man he used to be. The swagger was gone, replaced by a grey pallor. And a cheap suit provided by his public defender Sarah had frozen his assets so thoroughly he couldn't afford private counsel. He refused to look at the gallery. He stared at the table, pinging at his cuticles. Elena looked worse. She had lost weight. Her hair, usually dyed a vibrant blonde, was showing dark roots. She wore a simple blouse and slacks. When she entered the courtroom, her eyes immediately scanned the crowd, finding me. She looked at me with a mixture of pleading and hatred. I met her gated. I didn't blink. I didn't scowl. I observed. Data point. Defendant appears fatigued and unstable. Sarah Thorne was there too. She sat in the front row, looking like a grieving wife to the public. But when she caught my eye during a recess, she gave a microscopic nod. We were the silent architects of this scene. The testimony was brutal. The CFO of their company testified about the betrayal of trust. The forensic IT specialist walked the jury through the Apex Consulting shell company. Then, Sarah took the stand. She was magnificent. She played the part of the blindsided spouse perfectly, crying softly when asked about the watch engraving. But her testing was a dagger. She confirmed Julian's erratic behavior, his late-night work sessions, and the existence of the private server. She destroyed his character without raising her voice. When the verdict came down, it was a formality. Guilty on all counts. Wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, money laundering. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. The judge, the Honorable Margaret Chen, was known for her disdain for white-collar crime. She adjusted glasses and looked down at the two defendants standing before her. Mr. Thorne, Judge Chen said, her voice echoing in the wood-paneled room. You held a position of power and trust. You used that power to steal from your employers and to manipulate a subordinate into a criminal conspiracy. Your arrogance is matched only by your greed. Sentence: 8 years in federal prison. Restitution of $350,000. Julian slumped. His head hit the table. He didn't cry. He just collapsed inward. Then turned to Elena. Mrs. Vance, she said, your defense attorney argued that you were a victim of a manipulative boss. However, the evidence showed otherwise. You signed the invoices. You created the shell company names. You discussed, in detail, how to hide the funds. You were not a passenger in this vehicle. You were navigating. Elena was shaking. I could see her shoulders vibrating from the back of the room. You betrayed your employer, and you betrayed your husband, using the stability he provided to fund your criminal enterprise. Sentence: 3 years in federal prison, 2 years of supervised probation upon release. Elena let out a sound, sharp, high-pitched, keen, like a wounded animal. Her knees buckled. The bailiff had to catch her by the arm to keep her upright. Arthur, she screamed as they began to lead her away. She twisted in the bailiff's grip, looking back at me. Arthur, help me. Please. I'm so sorry. The courtroom was dead silent, save for her screams. People turned to look at me. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I adjusted my cuffs. I watched as the heavy oak door closed behind her, cutting off her voice. Over. I walked out of the courthouse, into the Seattle drizzle. The air felt cleaner than it had in years. Sarah was waiting for me on the steps. She was smoking a cigarette, habit I didn't know she had, or perhaps a new one she had picked up. "Did you get what you wanted?" she asked, blowing smoke into the grey air. "The books are balanced," I said. 3 years, she mused. "She'll be out in 18 months with good behavior." "She'll be a felon," I said. "With no career, no husband, and no money." 18 months or 18 years, her life as she knew it is dead. Sarah dropped the cigarette and crushed it under her designer heel. "I'm listing the house tomorrow," she said. "I'm moving to Chicago. Ascend has an office there. I need a reset." "Good luck, Sarah." "You too, Arthur." She looked at me, her blue eyes searching my face for a crack in the armor. "What are you going to do now?" I looked at the skyline, at the cranes and the water. "I'm going to simply," I said. I walked to my car. I didn't look back. The partnership was dissolved. The contract was fulfilled. I drove back to the townhouse. It was already sold. I had accepted an all-cash offer 3 days ago. The movers were coming tomorrow. I walked through the empty rooms. The dining room, where the beef Wellington had sat. The kitchen, where she had lied about the toast. The bedroom, she had slept beside me while dreaming of another man. I felt nothing. No sadness. No anger. Just the cool, hollow sensation of a space that has been cleared of clutter. I had extracted the rot. Now I could rebuild the structure. The water of Lake Union is different from the Puget Sound. It is calmer, flatter, a mirror for the changing sky. I sat on the stern deck of my new home, a 45-foot modern houseboat I had christened the Audit. It was a study in minimalism: glass, polished steel, and reclaimed teak. No clutter. No hidden corners. Everything on board had a function, or it didn't come aboard. It had been 8 months since the sentencing. The transition from husband to bachelor had been surprisingly efficient. I sold the townhouse for 15% over the asking price. The market was hot, and the buyers didn't care about the ghosts in the hallway. I liquidated the joint assets, paid the legal fees, and invested the remainder in low-risk index funds. I was solvent. I was secure. I was alone. The morning sun was cutting through the mist, illuminating the Seattle skyline in the distance. The Space Needle looked like a white spike driven into the clouds. I took a sip of coffee. Hand ground. Perfect temperature. My phone buzzed on the teak table. A text from Sarah. "Sarah, Chicago, 08 a.m. CST. Just saw the snow forecast. Missing the rain. Hope the boat is treating you well." I smiled faintly. Sarah and I hadn't spoken much since the trial. There was no romance there, only the shared camaraderie of soldiers who had survived the same trench. She was rebuilding in Chicago, tearing through the legal world with a renewed, terrifying vigor. We were connected by a secret history, 2 people who had refused to be victims. Me. What a glass today. Stay warm, Barracuda. I phoned down. Inside, on the kitchen counter, lay a single envelope. It had arrived yesterday in the batch of forwarded mail. It was plain white, standard issue. The return address was stamped in red ink, Federal Correctional Institution, Dublin. I knew the handwriting. It was smaller now, lacking the flamboyant loops she used to make when signing birthday cards. Author Vance C. O forwarding service. I hadn't opened it yesterday. I hadn't opened it this morning. I stood up and walked in the cabin. The boat swayed gently beneath my feet, a comforting, rhythmic reminder of fluidity. Picked up the envelope. It felt light, a single sheet of paper, maybe 2. I could imagine what it said. "Apologies, I didn't mean to hurt you." Excuses? I was lost. Nostalgia. Remember the good times? Or perhaps she was asking for money. Or a visit. I ran my thumb over the seal. For a brief moment, a flicker of curiosity sparked in my chest. The old Arthur, the husband who made avocado toast, would have torn it open. He would have looked for a sign of the woman he loved. But that man was gone. He had been erased in a line-item veto. I walked to my desk, a floating slab of walnut built into the wall. I opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a metal file box labeled Closed Accounts. It contained the USB drive with the evidence. It contained the divorce decree. It contained the auction receipt for her engagement ring. I didn't tear the envelope. I didn't burn it. It's dramatic. Filing is final. I dropped the unopened letter into the box. It landed with a soft whisper against the metal. I closed the drawer. Click. I walked back out to the deck. The sun had burned off the last of the mist. A seaplane was taking off from the lake, its engines roaring as defied gravity, lifting into the blue. People often talk about forgiveness as a release. They say you have to forgive to move on. I disagree. Forgiveness suggests that the debt been cancelled, that the books have been wiped clean out of charity. I didn't forgive Elena. I didn't hate her either. I had simply processed the transaction. She had taken a debit. I had exacted a credit. The account was balanced. I took another sip of coffee and watched the ripples spread across the water, outward and away, until they disappeared completely. The ledger was closed, and the view from here was perfect.